build a AWS CodePipeline, and it's very easy to set up. I created a Lambda function, and it just takes an input and produces an output in capital letters. So it's a .NET function. What's important here is I'm into code commit, because AWS CodePipeline takes code commit. It can take various ways to trigger a code pipeline. However, I'm using code commit to show you how you can, when you check in your code, how you can trigger a pipeline and deploy your code. So it's basically a CI/CD pipeline. So code pipeline uses code build, which needs to know how you're going to build your Lambda function if it's .NET. So in build spec file is the one that we use, and I'll show you in a second. It's very simple. It just restore .NET does the .NET restore. It publish into this folder, and that's it. So let's go, and we need a code build project first, so that AWS CodePipeline can use that. So let's start doing that. Okay, so I'm creating a create build. So I am creating a code build project. We can name it anything. Multi-region. So we need to mention the provider is code commit. Our repository is multi-region. We need to mention which operating system, and runtime, it's .NET. And that's pretty much it. Yes, so it needs to know which role it's going to be using to execute this, and I already have an existing role that I'll be using it. Build spec file, the one I was referring before, it uses by default this, so we should be fine. Artifacts, we are not going to use that. If you're just using this code build project to deploy your artifacts in an S3 bucket, then you can use that, but we are not using it. We just wanted to build our project. So create this project, and it's done. Let's go to code pipeline, and let's start beginning with click pipeline, create pipeline, and just name it multi-region. Use an existing role because I already have one. And default location is when first time you create a code pipeline in your region, it creates a default location, and I believe it remains same for all the pipelines that you use, but you can actually use custom location if you would like. I'm using just the default location. It needs to know the source, how it needs to get triggered. You can use different sources, but code commit is the one, so that when we check in our code, this pipeline gets triggered. Repository and the branch is the master, and we choose CloudWatch events. We have another option where code pipeline actually keeps polling code commit to see for changes. I think for obvious reasons, CloudWatch events are recommended. Let's go to the next one, and it needs to know a build. So we already created this AWS code build project, and that's a multi-region. That's the name of the project. Next, now the deployment part. That's kind of interesting. So now at this point, this is the third stage or the fourth stage where it's getting deployed. Actually, the AWS Lambda functions can get deployed. Use CloudFormation and the action, so it can create or update. So every time it runs, it can update, but on the first go, it actually creates the stack. So name of the, so you can just put the name, and I'll create that CloudFormation stack with that name. Templates, it's kind of important because I'll show you just in just a second. Build artifacts is a variable which basically holds the location where your project has been built and deployed, like the artifacts directory. And then you say, okay, go to that and then get to this file. The file is important. I'll show you in a second what the file does. If I go back to this code commit and I show you the file, it's this CloudFormation file. It's just it shows, okay, the CloudFormation is going to deploy this method. That's the name, that's the handler, that's the role. I've already created a role for that. It'll be using that role to execute this Lambda function. But what's more important is these two, where it says where's the code. So there's two reference points, the bucket and the key, and build bucket and the key. So that needs to be filled in, and then it gets executed, and then your code Lambda function gets deployed. So back to the pipeline, when we are saying, okay, go here where your package is, and then that's where your template is. And again, the role name, I already have this role created that can create or manage CloudFormation stacks. So this is, I'll just fill it up and I'll show you in a second. Right. Okay. So build, remember, so in CloudFormation template, these two values needs to be filled in, and that's coming from build artifacts. Location, and that location is holding what's the bucket name and the object key is. So it'll fill in these values and then execute it. So let's create it, and I'll pause the video. Okay guys, I resume the video now. I paused because first time when we create the code pipeline, it actually executes it, and I did not want to waste that time, because I want to show you when I check in the code, I want to show you execution of this code pipeline. So you can see it's all just deployed now. However, if I go back, I want to show you the execution. If I go to code commit, and so okay, so by this time we should have Lambda before I do code commit, because the first execution should have deployed it. So if I refresh our Lambda functions, and let's see if we've got any Lambda. Okay. Yes. Okay. So 2 minutes ago, it created this Lambda function. I go to this Lambda function and let me test this out. What does it do? So if I configure params and hello, and if I just test it, so I just executed just an output in capital letters. So let's go ahead and now do a commit. So if I go to here and say if I change the code, sorry, I need to go to a different file. If I go to this function and I edit it, and if I show code pipeline working and commit it, So once I commit this one, we should see the pipeline getting triggered very quickly now. Okay, let's wait for it. It's taking some time. Oh, see, no, yeah, it actually already kicked in and it just completed. Just missed it. So it's building this one now. So what it does is when it and I'll show you in a second. When the source step gets executed, it takes the code and put it in an S3 bucket, and I'll show you in a second. In S3 bucket, this is our default S3 bucket. If we refresh it, it should have some folder in there by now. Yep. So source artifacts folder basically creates a source of this. So it created one when we created it, and then when we checked another one, our code, it created another one. So the source comes in, it's just the source. But what does this do? The build one, and actually you can see the when the code build gets executed on the second step, that those artifacts come in the build artifact folder here. And while it was getting executed, it's completed now, but I can just show you, you can actually click on these details and it'll show you how it's all getting executed. So while it's building, you can actually have a look at it as well. Okay, so now going back to the same method in Lambda, just to see, it says 1 minute ago, so it's our new function should be here. We just execute it and see whether the output has that string that we added. So if I just test it again, it says hello, code pipeline working. So it's all working here. I hope this video has helped you, and if any questions, let me know and I'll get back to it. And as I mentioned, shortly I'll be creating another video with code pipeline to show how you can deploy a code into multi-regions. There's an out-of-the-box option, but there's a custom option which is more flexible, and that's the reason I thought there needs to be a separate video for that. All right, guys, you have a nice day. Bye.